Now I want to talk about a common way that many of us need to improve in our first drafts, and that is adding detail. If you hear from your teacher or from your classmates who've read your story that you need to add detail, I want to give you a few tips or strategies for how you can do that, because there are different ways of adding detail. So one thing I want to talk about is the setting. If you need to add detail to your setting because you've heard from your first readers that they couldn't get a sense of the place or where your scene was happening, they couldn't really picture it, and they didn't really understand where your characters were, where the scene happened. The tip that I would offer is not to go in the other extreme and over describe your place. Don't try to say it was a forest with lots of trees and there were squirrels scampering all over and birds chirping and there were lots of oak trees and there were pine needles all over. Just don't do that. As a tip, I would offer using a simile or a metaphor, which is a literary technique you may have already learned in school. And just to simplify that as a way of explaining it, it means something is like something else, or it is as, it's as bushy as a squirrel's tail. It's as cold as the coldest day in January, or if you're linking something to something else, comparing something to something else. So think about describing your forest that way. Instead of listing all the things that are in the forest, you could say, the dark forest was as creepy as an old dilapidated house on Halloween night, or the forest was as quiet and peaceful as a fresh spring meadow. Or, I'm making these up off the top of my head, so bear with me, but I'm trying to make the point. So if the school was, busy and loud, think of something else that's busy and loud that you could compare it to. You could say, the classroom was as noisy as a circus, or it was as noisy as an amusement park. Think of something like that you can say to describe your setting using a simile or a metaphor. It will go a long way to allowing your reader to picture and to imagine what is your scene. So the next way that I want to talk about in terms of adding detail, which is related to another video that I did in the drafting series, which is about focusing on the heart. Make sure that you are using enough detail so that your readers can understand your character's emotional state. And if it's a personal narrative, that character is you. So what is your character feeling? One way that you can add ways that your character is feeling or their emotions without telling us, I was sad or I was excited, is showing. And one way you could do that is to look in a mirror. And whether it's you or whether it's another character in your story, you can still use this. Look in a mirror and pretend that you are feeling the emotion that your character is. Maybe your character is nervous. Maybe your character is impatient. They're not happy that they have to wait for something. Try to mimic that emotion into the mirror and notice, what are you doing with your body? Are your eyebrows coming together? Are you clenching your fists? Are your eyes really wide and your mouth is open? Try it. Think of different things that you can do. If you're writing from the first person, I can't say my mouth was open and my eyes are big, but you could say you felt your eyes bulging, or my mouth dropped open with surprise, something like that. And of course, if you're writing about a secondary character, you certainly can describe what they looked like, but what do you sound like when you're nervous? Do you tap your foot? Do you drum your fingers on the table? Do that in the mirror and just see if you can't come up with a couple of details that you notice about someone who's experiencing that emotion and work that into your story. And now, the third way that I'm going to share with you as a way to add detail into your stories is to use your 5 senses. So think about it. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Those are our 5 senses. And even if you're writing from the point of view of an animal, animals have senses too. Usually they're the same senses that we have, although they might use them differently. So definitely keep that in mind. But ask yourself, in a particular scene that maybe doesn't have enough detail, what does the character see? What does the character hear? What might the character smell or taste or touch? What do they feel? Those are all things that you can ask yourself to help you delve deeper into your scene. What's going on? What is that character experiencing? And bonus points if you can find a way to use what the character sees or hears or smells, etc., into what's going on in the scene. So maybe if your character smells smoke, or they smell a barbecue from the house next door, how does that affect them? Do they remember another barbecue, or are they hungry? Did they get hungry, or do they wish the neighbors would invite them over for a hot dog? Whatever it is, if that makes sense within your scene, it's really awesome when you can take some sensory detail like that and actually link it into the action of your scene. So those are 3 different ways that you can add detail. Describing your setting using a simile or a metaphor, right? Describing your character's emotion by looking in the mirror and making observations. And then the third is asking yourself about the 5 senses and seeing how you can add sensory detail. So give it a try and see if those don't help you add detail to your story.